Andragogy. Let's say what we knew then. Andragogy has been around for quite some time. Pedagogy, that's been the predominant way of delivering information since like the 7th century. But what we used to say was pedagogy was kids and andragogy was adults. But it didn't take long before people figured out it's not necessarily kids versus adults. It's really about structure versus autonomy. Being dependent versus being independent as a learner. And that's really what this is all about when we look at the online learning. The role of life experiences. We assume, if we look at the hardcore andragogical model, that only adults bring life experiences through which they filter their experiences. Well, now we know, no. We have young people, college-age people, and working adults who are all bringing their experiences to the table. Their issues with trust, their issues with control, all play into how they learn and how they interact with learning material. We've already talked about autonomy versus dependence in developing schema. This is one of those things that I don't think we've given enough conversation to in the online learning, and that is the fact that this is not just them interacting with a computer or in a discussion board, but this is about what's taking place in their minds and how their schema are developing and whether or not they understand how to build their knowledge base. What we know now is, pedagogy and andragogy are really more about content, experience, cognitive style, the package as a learner and who they are and what they need. Understanding both theories reduces frustrations for both learners and faculty, and we're going to talk a little bit about how that plays out. And that these are both perfect for the online environment, and the online environment is a wonderful place to combine these two to create something that's so robust from the learning and the teaching perspective that it really opens up an entirely new dimension. We always think it's either or. I'm fascinated by the fact that people always feel like they have to choose one or the other. That's not the case. I really believe, and now we have research that supports the fact that if we look at pedagogy and andragogy as a continuum, we can really come up with some phenomenal ways to help our learners go from being dependent to independent learners. And that's what it's all about. Whether they are learning for the sake of learning and, taking the Renaissance approach, everyone wants to get to the point where they can climb Bloom's taxonomy, whether they know it and understand it or not, or whether they're approaching it from the workforce perspective and they're going to have a boss out there who wants them to be able to solve problems and to be able to think and manage information and make decisions. Let's look at it as a continuum and see what happens there. Facilitating true learning. The work of Ruth Clark has really been phenomenal in my life because she takes such a wonderful view of how you do all these things. And this information on the 3 views of learning actually is taken directly from her book, I believe, on building expertise. But there are 3 primary views of learning. It's transmission, absorption, which that's our lecture model. We deliver information, they absorb it, and then they give it back to us, usually very close to the way that we say it, right? Then you have the behavioral approach, which if you're into behavioral objectives, which go behavioral objectives, right? Actually tell the learner what behavior you want them to demonstrate, and then that allows you to assess whether or not they've actually mastered that material at the appropriate level. And then you have the constructive view that's all about how do they build knowledge? Are they building knowledge? Are we facilitating their ability to build knowledge? Well, again, usually you talk to someone and they feel like they have to choose. I'm one of these 3. This is my approach. This is my philosophy on teaching. But I believe that if we are really looking at taking our learners from being dependent to independent, that we really are probably climbing in this continuum also from, okay, there's always going to be that basic information that you just need to sit and listen to or read to take in. Then you're going to want to see, okay, can you demonstrate that you know how to perform a proper analysis, that you know how to compare and contrast, that you can do inductive and deductive reasoning. Then we want to get them to the point where, while we don't see what's taking place in their mind, we have them doing synthesis type work, which means they are actually constructing knowledge and able to take what they have learned and build something new and different. Now, the other two items I have up here, reflection and connecting the dots. It's really interesting that we don't talk more about reflection, because reflection is the key to making sure their dots are connecting or that they're building schemata. But so many times when we're teaching, it's about how much information we can put out. And unfortunately, I've actually had close friends who I look at what they're doing academically, like in the classroom with their students, and it is screaming quantity, not quality. There's no time built in for reflection. There are no assignments that focus on reflection. It's all about cranking out work, either putting information into them and cranking it out from the faculty member, or getting them to crank out work to submit that proves that they heard verbatim what you said. So reflection has to be built into the experiences in order for people to actually learn and have the time and go through the exercises needed to learn how to build knowledge. And then connecting the dots. This is one of those things that I started doing to help the people at TCN that I work with every day who don't have the same background but who are very interested in what I do, whether it's from the marketing perspective or the sales perspective, to actually understand what I mean when I talk about building schemata and building knowledge and using information. Basically, if you look at a course, we have a collection of dots that represent the information we want to get to the learner. And how we present our dots is all about how we were trained, how we were taught, and what our personal beliefs are. A lot of times when we present our dots, we don't necessarily present them in a way that helps people understand, well, you need to throw that dot away because that was really just extraneous information or a transition or something like that. What we really want them to do is something very particular with the dots, and we need to lead them in that process. So we go from having a randomly placed bunch of dots to having dots that actually represent some structure. But ideally, what we really want them to do is to start to connect their dots. This is learning. The connection between the dots is what we want to take place in their minds. This we will see when they write a paper, when they give a talk, when they do certain things that takes them up Bloom's taxonomy and ties it all together. But we can't just give people dots and then have them either give them back exactly the way they were presented, or worse yet, and this is what's most frustrating for me as an educator, is when I see people take their dots and line them up perfectly in a nice, neat row, and then say, I should have gotten an A. Because I took my dots, and I did what I was supposed to do with my dots, and in all my other classes, that's what I did with my dots, and I got an A. And they don't even understand that they haven't budged one bit of the taxonomy, and they're not working toward being independent, wise users of information who can actually take that and do something with it. So when I talk about connecting the dots and building schemata, this is really where I think we have a lot of untapped potential in online learning, and where we need to help our faculty members understand pedagogy and andragogy and how all this kind of plays together.